Another Hot Topic Tuesday. It is the 27th of February. Guys, 2/12 of 2024 is gone. Like, see ya, bye-bye. I wanted to throw out a little bit the kind of continuation from last week, where what we know, we were talking about just a couple of catch-alls, but that simple reminder that real estate is simple. It just requires the really hard work. And what's the hard work? Waking up every morning, knowing that we're unemployed, that we've got to go set up job interviews, and then going out and either directly reaching out to people or doing the things necessary that will get people to call and talk with us. And that's a discussion that, if you got people around you today, talk to them about what you do. If you've got people in the office, because you're gathered like we are here today in Rochester, talk to the people about what is it that we can do? What would fulfill those two things? But let's go ahead and get focused on today's hot topic. And guys, it's around this thing called procuring cause. Procuring cause. So I've had a number of issues that have come my way from a number of different directions with the potential of procuring cause. And so it was like, now is a great time to be able to discuss this. It's been on my potential list of topics for quite some time. So here we go. I say, here we go. Advance for me. There we are. So here's the definition as defined by NAR. And it is defined in Article 17 of the Code of Ethics. And it says it is the uninterrupted series of casual events which results in the successful transaction. Now, that's their little definition. It says in practice, the broker's efforts set off the unbroken chain of events will be regarded as the procuring cause. So I guess in short, what we may be talking about is simply who's introduced them to the property, and because of that introduction, because of their actions, it ended up in a successful transaction. Those casual events must be a series of unbroken events. So let's take a little bit deeper look to this. Here's a sample. So as you can read, I'll read along with you here. A buyer contracted broker Jim to show her several homes over a period of weeks. The buyer liked one home and asked broker Jim to re-show the property to her, and her mom, dad, sister. Broker Jim showed the property a third time to an inspector, and as they were leaving the home, the buyer said she would email broker Jim to follow up. A few days later, broker Jane, who had not shown the property, called broker Jim and offered a 25% referral fee, we'll say to go away, as broker Jane wrote an offer on the property for the buyer, which then the seller accepted. So in this case, would broker Jim have procuring cause? What do you guys think? You can put it into the chat sessions here too, the chat room, or you can take yourself off if you're bold enough. What do you think? Let me just do this because I can say that you might be correct. If you said yes, you might be correct. If you said no, you might be correct. It does appear on the surface that broker Jim had all things due procuring cause. It appears that there are all of the things necessary to be able to determine procuring cause. So when I say you may be correct, the nature and status of the transaction, how did it come about? There's lots of things that they're going to look at in regards to the nature and status of the transaction. Have we even closed? Are we dealing with it? Because you can't deal with a successful transaction until it's actually closed. What are the roles and relationships of the parties? We don't know if broker Jim was a listing broker. Was he something else? I guess you'd even have to question, what about agency agreements, disclosures? There's a number of things that we need to take a look at. The initial contact with the buyer is another one. Who was the initial contact? Was it Jim or was it Jane? Was it originally Jane and then it came back around to Jane? Was it originally Jim? Jim maintained it. Again, all these things need to go into taking a look at, do we have procuring cause? Then the continuity and the breaks in the continuity. If, yes, I showed him a series of properties and then I let 3 weeks go by after showing a property, didn't contact him, didn't reach out to him, didn't text him, didn't email him. There was a break in that chain, a break in the continuity. I stand to miss out because of that break. So these are some of the things that goes into procuring cause. And oh, by the way, one of the things I haven't mentioned is when we talk about procuring cause, if I have a signed contract with the buyer, does that have direct impact upon procuring cause? Not really. What we're dealing with in regard to procuring cause, so make note of this, we're dealing with the amount of money offered as compensation by the listing broker. This is not our compensation due and payable from the buyer. This is compensation that we would receive because of the offer of compensation from the listing broker. So know that it doesn't have anything to deal with the listing broker unless if the listing broker was also the selling broker whom we may have a claim of procuring cause against. Otherwise, they're out of the picture. It's who jumped in and potentially stole our buyer, stole our transaction, potentially stole our commission. That's the money that we're talking about when we're dealing with procuring cause. Next, what do I do? What do I do to avoid the dispute, the potential of having procuring cause? Well, first is we need to be aware of all the factors that affect it. So the tips, there's 4 basic ones that I can give you here today. Ask prospective buyers if they are working with another broker, 1, and whether or not they signed an exclusive representation agreement. So as we've been talking about the lawsuit, the settlement, our new paperwork, the disclosures that we need to make regarding commissions to both the buyer and the seller, it's important that we understand that it goes into even to the extent of procuring cause. Always use a buyer brokerage agreement. Attend open houses and tour model homes with buyer clients and sign in as their broker. Now it's not only us with our buyers, but we're putting all of these people on notice. As a minimum, if my buddy Stevie on here is holding an open house, I'm going to call Stevie on and say, hey, I got James and Amanda that are going to come by your open house today. Just wanted to let you know they are my buyers. And that wouldn't matter if it's my buddy Stevie on here at the same office or if that is Joe Schmuck over at Schmo's Realty. I'll call them and just let them know as a minimum that, hey, I'm sending my buyers through. You can even say I have an exclusive right to represent agreement with them. I have a buyer agency contract with them. Oh, let's see. Stay in contact with the buyer clients. So this is important. If all you've done is you set them up and you're giving them the search through the MLS, That's not going to count, guys. Let's face it, none of us would call that staying in communication with. All right. So stay in contact with the buyer clients, keep a communications log. When have you talked with them? Obviously, one of the things that we do with our email is we make sure that we keep all sent email, because that way we have the log. If you have, and gosh, remember this either way, text messages, that should keep the log. We don't delete our text messages. So that will keep a log. But remember, by the way, that's keeping a log. So we always have to be careful what we say. I've seen some interesting things, chairing the grievance committee of what gets pushed out toward professional standards in arbitration hearings. And when they're interested in a property, always ask. I should have underlined this one. Ask if they want to write an offer. Because who got the buyer to put it on paper is an important part to determining who actually has the procuring cause. So you need to ask. And it could be simple questions like, well, tell me what you thought of this house. What did you like most? What did you like least? Would you even consider this as your next home? Now, if they say, well, yeah, well, let me ask you, we've looked at 3 homes. We know that you liked Easy Street right now is best. What would you put first? This one would be number 1, or would Easy Street be number 1? We need to have that type of communication with them all along. So when we get done that day and we showed multiple houses, we can go back and say, so let me ask you, Easy Street still at the top of your list? Yeah. Do you think that's the one that could become your new home? Yes. Then let's take a look. Let's make a logical decision to move forward with an offer. And that's where we get into helping them through comparables. What's the negotiating strategy we should use, and so on. But always ask, do you want to make the offer? Last one, if you discover you're writing an offer on a property that buyers saw with another broker, ask the buyers why they didn't pursue the property with the other broker. It may become a determining factor as to whether or not you have procuring cause. And I'll tell you, I'm involved in one right now that this may or may not be a sticking issue for one where it is an arbitration hearing. Don't know, but we'll find out. But it is a key that you find out. And I want to point out on the agency disclosure, the last statement right before we have them sign is basically, we do or do not have another agency relationship with. And there's a reason that that's there. So don't buzz by that. That's your point to get that last minute of clarification to avoid any procuring cause situation, or at least address it up front, the way in that scenario that broker Jane called and said, hey, we got a little bit of an issue. Here's what's going on. I'd like to offer you 25% to go away and just let me close this so that we can avoid arbitration. There is available to you what is called a NAR arbitration worksheet. So when we deal with arbitration, we're not talking a violation of the code of ethics. Arbitration is, hey, I'm owed money. So I go to an arbitration panel, which is between realtors, where I can get my money, of which procuring cause is one of those where we would do arbitration. The arbitration worksheet, let me just show you. You should be able to pull this up fairly easily. There we go. All right. It's not a short worksheet, and it's not specific to procuring cause. But many of the things are on here are to help a panel in determining procuring cause. If you ever find yourself in this situation, you're going to go to your manager, your broker, and say, here's what's happened. This is a series of events that are created. This is where we're now at. And guys, I've been on both sides of this with our agents, and I can tell you most of the time, we're going to try to get somebody to understand that they're not doing anything, but we'll give them 25%. And oh, by the way, if we're ever on the wrong side of this, we may end up just taking 25%. But we need to take a look. But here's the one thing I can tell you. If you go to an arbitration and it is being a hearing and you're sitting before 3 of your peers on a professional standards committee, there's no guarantee that you're going to get paid, because we don't know exactly what has occurred on the other side that led up to someone actually procuring a transaction. So normally, let's try to get a settlement. But you can, by simply going on, look up NAR procuring cause. You could put in NAR and type in the arbitration worksheet, and you will find this information. I just want you to catch that all of this is out there. There's lots of things that it checks out. Again, it is not specific to the aspect of procuring cause, but many of the things that are on here, and guys, I'm going to shuffle through this so that you can see how long and extensive it actually is. So multiple pages, loads of things that it's looking into to be able to see and assist an arbitration panel in an arbitration hearing to discover who should be awarded the compensation offered that was offered and paid by the listing broker. So that's what I've got, guys. We'll open it up. Nobody's actually, from what I can see, had anything. Let me open up the chat and see what we've got. Let's see, is this the same buyer? That situation that I used earlier, under that, it would have been the same buyer. Therein lies the issue, because it was broker, what did I have? Broker Jim with broker Jane. Broker Jim did all that work, and then broker Jane popped her head in somehow. So yeah, that's always the procuring cause issue, is that somebody ended up taking somebody's buyer and the compensation that comes along with that. Yeah, and John had asked the question, was the buyer under contract? In this case, my scenario didn't really stipulate that. But would a buyer under contract have a little bit more in favor for the individual in regards to procuring cause? Yes. So it's not an underlying main point, but it's another thing that goes into consideration. I got to tell you that I believe even the aspect of a disclosure. Did the agent do a disclosure? Did they only do a disclosure? Was there no buyer agency contract? That would go into their determination. So there's a lot that goes into that. And guys, those are the only questions I'm seeing. Has anybody else got anything else? Take yourself off mute or just type it in. Let's see if there's anything else. One that came in, if they do not want to sign a buyer agency, when you show a house, would it be okay for them to sign the listing ticket and date it to you to have a leg to stand on? Not a bad idea. It definitely shows that you did have it. I probably wouldn't be overly worried about it in most circumstances. The reason being is we've got showing time, and there's a record that has the homes that we've shown. So the only thing it may do is to give some verification, but the buyer themselves could be one that we would get a statement from if they couldn't attend the hearing, as an example. And maybe they're not on our side for all we know, because we were the one that now we're having to claim procuring. Is the buyer going to be with us or not? We don't know. So it wouldn't hurt. But it really brings back the aspect that we should start every buyer with a buyer agency contract. We should, in the midst of every conversation, say, by the way, look, ask assumptively, as far as I'm concerned, how long have you been looking for a home? Well, who's been showing you the homes? Who's been showing you the homes? They've been looking. Somebody's been showing it. And if they say, well, we've been looking at homes with multiple agents, we really haven't got one. Well, that opens it up. They say, well, I've been working with Danny. Danny who? No, I'm just kidding. But I would say, Danny, really, which office is she at? When she's over at the Rochester office, matter of fact, your company. And I'm going to go, great. Well, are you really wanting to work with Danny? Yes. Then why are you calling me? No, that's not what I'm going to say. I'm going to politely say that you do need to get a hold of Danny because you are working with her. Okay. I got a question based off of that one.
Yeah, if somebody has gone with another realtor.
How do you know if someone's gone and looked at that house with another realtor? You hope that they're honest. It's really the answer. But it starts with us. Look, we could get all the way up to the agency disclosure right before we have them signed. By the way, this part is just asking, do you have any other contract signed with any other agent? Do you? Now, hopefully we asked that a while ago.
The question actually is the reverse. How do you know, like, if you worked with somebody and they said, okay, I've changed my mind, I don't wish to purchase a house right now, and then 3 weeks later they go with their brother-in-law? And
I don't know if you could hear that, but basically Danny, who I'm using as I'll call you the scapegoat. But Danny went out and she showed the home and the buyer really wasn't interested. She did everything right. She asked, do you want to buy this home? Do you want to make an offer on it? They said no. And then 3 weeks later, they went out with Steve Yon, and Steve Yon wrote the offer. Danny could be up a creek. There was a break in the chain of events. And especially if there was no communication from when you showed the property that day to when you found out that they made the offer. If there was no text, no emails, no communication, guess what? I would think you're out of, and he gets to keep everything. Yeah, Sherry, you're absolutely right. It's not going to show who the buyer was, but you're going to have your communication. So in the aspect of, would it be a good idea to have the buyer initial the half sheet? Yeah. It can't hurt, right? Or have them sign. It can't hurt. You may put, maybe, you know what, I've never thought about it. When we put in an appointment, one of the things it asks for, buyer's name. So now you do have it logged in there as to who you were showing the home to. That might be a great reason. Of course, if you use the showing time, what do we call it? Tour, cranial flatulation moment. You guys know what I'm talking about, where you can set up multiple properties, whatever showing time refers to that as. That also would be one where the buyer would be noted as to who you were taking and where they were taking them to. Certainly nothing wrong with risk reduction, I think, is the way that I would put that. Ollie was saying, I asked them if they signed any paperwork. Great one, because if you say, have you signed a contract? Did you sign an exclusive right to represent? Did you sign a buyer agency contract? Remember, we're talking general public. It might have went, and they go, no. So it's also one of the things that, Holly, I've also taught. I would ask a buyer, by the way, this is in the initial conversation with them when I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to go as an appointment with them or invite them to sit down with me. I would ask, by the way, well, have you worked with any other agents? Yes. Well, what paperwork have you signed? I leave it very open, because if they don't know that they've signed a buyer agency contract, they may have only signed an agency disclosure. But if they don't know what they've signed, then I can say, I'll tell you what, bring whatever you brought with you, and we'll take a look at whether or not we're able to work with each other. And I can let you know what it is that you've signed. Anybody that's lost that much who's willing to come in and meet with you, bringing in paperwork that they've signed, it's a good thing. So yeah, Holly, I like that idea. How much time do you have to file a claim? Brenda, do you know?
Somewhere around that 180 days.
Yeah, it might be around that 6 month. Does any of my other long-term experts know how long we have to be able to file a claim for procuring cause? I don't have an answer for it, but I might be able to find out. But I do 6 months. It may be a common theme that goes between all of the agreements anyway. But I'm thinking around it. And yeah, how long will it take us to even find out? We may never find out if we don't follow up. And by the way, if we haven't followed up with the buyer, we probably didn't deserve it anyway. Right? But remember, yeah, buyers are liars and sellers are too. They do. So it's up to us to be able to control that. Okay? You got a question here, statement?
For example, you work with this person and they tell you they decided just to wait, and 3 weeks have gone by and then they contact someone else for a showing or something. Just kind of lending some more weight to what you said, you can still keep in touch.
Stay in touch, even if they.
Send them a text or an email or a phone call the following week and say, hey, you know, I'm still sending you listings. Are you still looking at them?
Yes.
Call the next week, just following up, the listings that I sent, is there anything that's of interest?
Yeah. So out here, guys, what Brenda just brought up here is there will be times when, and I will tell you that I've had this in my management days a couple of times where this came up. The buyer says, we're on hold for now. That doesn't mean you stop communicating with them. By them saying, we're on hold for now, they may actually be on hold. On the other hand, if you don't follow up with them for 6 weeks and somebody else went in and showed them a home, you're already up a creek. But if you let 6 weeks go by and 4 weeks had passed and they made an offer with another agent, you're probably up a creek. Because look, we should be able to take people for their word, right? But here's what I want to let you know. You're only up a creek in regards to procuring cause. If we followed all of the forms correctly, we've disclosed correctly, we had them sign a buyer representation agreement. Now we're talking filing suit against the buyer for our commission. Now, is that an automatic? No. We have to measure what's the probability versus potential, risk versus reward. So we're not always going to go after it, but if you've done everything right, we do have the potential to at least go after the buyer and ask for them to compensate us. Yeah, Luigi actually was making that recommendation that within showing time, we do put the buyer's name in there, either for the buyer or the buyer tour, so that it is noted. Sherry given a suggestion. What I do is text my buyer with their name listed in my phone, the showing time schedule of properties we see in times. Another great way of being able to cover yourself. Thank you, Sherry, for that. Holly, what happens when they come to you wanting to look at a home, but they don't want to work with the agent they have been working with for a few months and have not signed anything? That's going to be where first let's get together. Let's make sure that they're not under contract, because if they are under contract, we can't do anything until they're out of that contract. And basically what I would do is to go, well, Mary Jo, until you are able to get out of that contract, either through its expiration or because they released you from it, I really can't help you because I'd be committing you to make a payment in commission compensation twice. So we basically, we can't help them get out of it. We just got to tell them that I can't help until you are out of it. I got a question here.
And the other realtor who they don't like has kept in contact with them. So they've kept in contact, they've said to the other realtor to not, not say we dislike you, but they've said we're gonna pause because they don't want to hurt that realtor's feelings. The realtor continues to do everything.
Let me catch them up so that they can understand your question. So what happens in the event that somebody says, hey, we're on pause, and we stay in touch with them because this person just tell us they were going on pause because they didn't want to hurt our feelings that they were dumping us. And then
They
they want to go work with some other agent now before the contract expires. Oh, there's no contract. So if there's no contract that we had them sign, this is actually a great one to understand why we get contract signed. If no contract is signed and they say we're on pause and they were being kind, and then they go find and work with somebody else, oh well. On any home that we shown, did you stay in contact? Did you ask them to make an offer? So all of these things go into whether or not you would have procuring cause. We couldn't go after the buyer to pay the compensation, but we may have the right to actually file for procuring cause and ask for that compensation. However, the aspect of them going and buying from somebody else, we can't do anything about it because we didn't have a signed contract. Okay? So guys, I think, yeah, Jamie, by the way, just to highlight, Jamie put in here, I've sent proof of letting the agent go. But remember this, guys, I like that. We should have that they were released from the contract. But remember this, sending a text, a buyer sending a text, a buyer sending an email saying, hey, I don't want to buy from you, I'm gone. No. It's a bilateral agreement. Matter of fact, it's right toward the end before we sign that it says this can only be released mutually. It took two to enter it. It takes those same two parties to leave it. So they cannot just say, oh yeah, no, I notified them, I fired them. Got to have a release from the contract. Sellers, a listing, they got to have a release from it. It's not an automatic thing. And this is one of the things that we all need to know. We don't automatically release buyers and sellers from listing agreements and buyer representation agreements. It's not automatic. So make sure that you understand, read that, know which one it is, and highlight it. It's mutually a mutual release. Okay? So guys, with that, we're a couple of minutes over. I thought we'd be a few minutes short. We ended up 4 over. That's another Hot Topic Tuesday. Remember, second Tuesday is the deep dive coming up. Social media and video marketing, going to be a great session. Make sure that you got that one blocked out. Second Tuesday of March. We'll see you. Enjoy what's left of February. Make sure you're out talking to people. See you guys.